I grew up about an hour south of Chicago, and in the winter my family and I would go to this toboggan run in one of the nearby towns. There was a set of 4 metal slides going down one hill, and it was usually pretty crowded right after a good snowstorm. One time we went in late November, when the snow had already been on the ground for 2 weeks, and by then the crowd had begun to thin out. That day, when we pulled into the parking lot, I noticed how quiet it was. The snow was patchy and melting, leaving the metal slides looking worn and rusted in spots. There were only a handful of cars, and just a few families milling around. My parents decided to head to the lodge nearby for some hot chocolate, while my younger brother and I grabbed our toboggan and made our way to the slides. As we approached, an old man who seemed to work there shuffled over to us. He had a weathered face, deep lines etched into his skin, and his voice was rough, like he'd smoked too many cigarettes. "Be careful on those slides today," he said, his eyes darting toward the woods that border the hill. "There's something not right about this place when the crowds thin out." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" I asked, half curious, half skeptical. He hesitated, glancing around like he was afraid someone, or something, might overhear. "There are stories," he said finally, lowering his voice. "Legends, really, about a creature that lives in these woods. It only shows itself when there aren't many people around. They say it looks like a man, but it's not human. It lures kids into the forest, and, well, they don't come back." A chill ran through me, but for some reason I forced a laugh. "That's just a story, right?" I said, trying to sound tougher than I felt. The old man didn't smile. "I wish it was," he muttered. "I've seen things, heard things. Just stay close to each other, and whatever you do, don't go near the woods." Then he turned and shuffled off, leaving us standing there with his words hanging in the air. My brother looked at me, his eyes wide. "He's just trying to scare us," I said, though I wasn't entirely convinced myself. We brushed it off and started climbing the hill, dragging the toboggan behind us. The first few runs were fun. The cold air stung my face as we sped down the slides, and for a while I forgot about the old man's warning. But as we kept going, I couldn't shake this nagging feeling, like someone was watching us. Every time I glanced at the trees lining the hill, I thought I saw something move. It was always in the shadows, but when I looked closer, there was nothing there. After a while, most of the other families had left, and it was just us and a couple of stragglers. I was climbing back up the hill for another run when I saw him. A tall man in a dark coat, standing right at the edge of the woods. He was staring straight at me, and when our eyes met, he smiled, a slow, crooked grin that made my stomach twist. It definitely wasn't a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that said he knew something I didn't. I froze for a second, then hurried up to my brother. "Let's head back to the lodge," I said, keeping my voice low. "I don't feel safe here anymore." He nodded, sensing my unease, and we started walking back down the hill. But as we passed near the woods, the man called out to us. "Hey kids, want to see something amazing? It's just inside the forest." His voice was smooth, almost too smooth, like it didn't belong out here in the cold and wind. It sent a shiver down my spine. I remembered the old man's warning and tightened my grip on my brother's hand. "No, we're going back to our parents," I said, trying to sound firm. The man took a step closer, and that's when I saw his eyes. They were pitch black, no whites, no color, just endless voids. My breath caught in my throat, and I yanked my brother away, breaking into a run toward the lodge. Behind us, I heard him laugh. It wasn't a normal laugh. It was deep and guttural, echoing through the trees like it was coming from everywhere at once. We burst into the lodge, panting and shaking. Our parents looked up, startled. "What's wrong?" my mom asked, setting down her mug. "There was this guy," I stammered, "by the woods. He didn't seem human. His eyes were all black, and he tried to get us to go with him." My dad frowned. "Probably just some creep," he said, but I could tell he was worried. My mom tried to calm us down, saying I'd probably imagined it, but before they could say more, the old man from earlier walked in. He took one look at our faces and nodded, like he'd been expecting this. "You saw it, didn't you?" he said quietly. I nodded, still trembling. "What is it?" He sighed, his shoulders slumping. "It's an old entity, been haunting these woods for centuries. It feeds on fear, takes the shape of whatever will draw people in. You're lucky you didn't follow it. Plenty have, and they've never come back." My parents exchanged skeptical looks, but the old man was insistent. "You need to leave," he said. "Now. It won't follow you once you're out of here, but you can't stay." We didn't argue. We grabbed our stuff and piled into the car. As we pulled out of the parking lot, I couldn't help but look back. There he was, the man in the dark coat, standing at the edge of the lot, watching us. Those black eyes locked onto mine, and I swear I felt them pierce right through me. We drove home in silence. For weeks after, I couldn't sleep without seeing that face in my nightmares, the crooked smile, and the empty eyes. Every now and then, I'd hear about someone going missing in that area, and I'd wonder if that thing had gotten them. I never went back to that toboggan run. I don't care how much fun it used to be. Some places aren't worth the risk. And that's especially true when the crowds thin out. The town I grew up in had an old toboggan run that had been closed down for years. None of my friends really knew that much about it, but randomly in middle school we decided it would be fun to try to sneak in there. This was back before everything was put on TikTok, and we weren't chasing clout or anything. We were just a few weird kids with nothing better to do. There were 4 of us that night: me, Jake, Sarah, and Mike. Jake was the fearless one, always dragging us into some kind of trouble with that cocky grin of his. Sarah was the voice of reason, or at least she tried to be, always rolling her eyes but following along anyway. Mike was the jittery type, the kid who'd jump if a leaf fell too loud. And me? I was the instigator, the one who'd pushed the group just a little further than we should have gone. The toboggan run sat on the edge of town, swallowed up by thick woods that seemed to lean in closer the darker it got. It had been abandoned since before we were born, the slides choked with vines, the metal rusted and warped like it was rotting from the inside out. A chain-link fence circled the place, but it was so old and busted that slipping through was no problem. We'd heard stories about it, whispers from older kids about weird noises or lights in the trees, but we figured it was all just small-town nonsense. We picked a Saturday night to go, the full moon hanging heavy in the sky, casting this pale, creepy glow over everything. We met at the woodline, flashlights in hand, backpacks stuffed with chips and water bottles. Jake had snagged a pair of bolt cutters from his dad's garage and he led the way, hacking through the brush like some wannabe explorer. The air was chilly for a spring night, and the wind hissed through the trees, carrying this faint, sour smell, like wet dirt and something gone bad. When we reached the toboggan run, it was worse than I'd imagined. The slides towered over us, their twisted shapes glinting in the moonlight like giant skeletal fingers. The silence was suffocating, no crickets, no birds, just the creak of rusted metal swaying in the breeze. I felt this cold prickling up my spine, but I shook it off. Jake was already at the fence, prying open a gap. "Come on guys, let's check it out," he whispered, his voice cutting through the quiet. We slipped through one by one, stepping onto a carpet of dead leaves that crouched too loud under our sneakers. The deeper we went, the weirder it got. Twigs snapped in the distance, leaves rustled without any wind, and once, I swore I heard something like a whisper, just low enough to make me doubt it. Sarah brushed it off, saying, "It's just the wind," but her voice cracked, and I saw her grip her flashlight tighter. Mike was already freaking out. "Maybe we should head back," he mumbled, his eyes darting to every shadow. But Jake wasn't having it. "Don't be a chicken, let's hit the top." The stairs to the slide platform were a nightmare, rickety and groaning like they'd collapse any second. We climbed anyway, the metal cold and gritty under our hands. At the top, the view was unreal. The whole toboggan run stretched out below us, swallowed by the woods that seemed to pulse with darkness. The moonlight threw long, jagged shadows, and for a split second, I thought I saw something shift in the trees, something big. "Did you see that?" I said, pointing into the black. Jake squinted. "See what?" "I don't know. Something moving," I said, my pulse hammering. Sarah scoffed, but it sounded forced. "Probably a deer or whatever. You're paranoid." We decided to slide down anyway. One by one we went, the metal screeching like a scream as we shot through the dark. It was a rush, but that feeling, like eyes boring into me, wouldn't quit. We did a few runs, laughing it off, trying to shake the nerves. But then, as we huddled at the bottom, catching our breath, it happened. A growl, low, guttural, rumbling up the woods like it came from something alive but wrong. Our laughter died fast. Mike's face went white. "What was that?" he hissed. "Probably just an animal," Jake said, but his bravado was slipping. Then we saw it. Something stepped out from the tree line, a massive, shadowy thing, taller than any guy I'd ever seen. Its limbs were long and thin, bent in ways they shouldn't be, and its eyes, glowed like dull red coals in the dark. It didn't move fast. Instead, it just stood there, watching us. "Run!" Jake yelled, and we bolted. We tore through the underbrush, flashlights swinging, branches clawing at our faces. Behind us, I heard it, crashing heavy steps tearing through the woods, that growl chasing us like a living thing. We hit the fence, scrambling over it so fast I felt the metal rip my jeans and scrape my hands raw. We didn't stop running until we broke out of the woods, collapsing in a heap at the edge, gasping and shaking. When we dared to look back, the toboggan run was still. The slides gleamed silently under the moon, and the woods were a wall of black, No glowing eyes, no crashing steps, just quiet, too quiet. We never went back, but we did tell our parents, the cops, and anyone who'd listen. But they all laughed it off, said we'd spooked ourselves, maybe saw a bear or a trick of the light. But we knew what we saw, or at least we think we did. Jake swears it was real, Mike won't talk about it, and Sarah still insists it was nothing. I personally don't know anymore. Years later, driving past those woods still makes my stomach twist. Whatever it was, monster, shadow, or just our dumb kid brains, it stuck with me. And sometimes, late at night, I swear I can still hear that growl echoing in the dark. I worked at a local amusement park in high school. For privacy reasons, I won't share the name of this place. I was only there a few months altogether, since I was seasonal help. In addition to other attractions, this place had a toboggan run with 2 metal slides curving down a hill between the trees. Each one was about 1/4 of a mile. They were easily our biggest attraction. I mainly helped with making sure the visitors were strapped into the toboggans properly, though I also frequently helped retrieve the toboggans from the bottom of the hill. The park itself was a chaotic sprawl of lights and noise, roller coasters rattling overhead, and the constant hum of arcade games. And of course, there was the chatter of the crowds. However, the toboggan run was different. It sat off to the side, down a winding dirt path lined with thick evergreens that blocked out most of the park's clamor. During the day, it was busy enough, with riders yelling as they sped down the slides, but there was always this odd stillness to it, like the trees swallowed the sound. My job wasn't that bad at all. I check straps, give safety instructions, and sometimes haul the toboggans back up the hill when the line slowed down. It was routine and predictable until about 6 weeks in, when I started noticing her. She wasn't like the usual guests. Most people came in groups, decked out in bright summer clothes, laughing and snapping photos. This woman was alone, always dressed in the same thing, a long, faded gray coat that hung off her thin frame, even in the heat. Her hair was stringy and dark, and fell over her face like a curtain. She'd show up a few times a week, lingering near the toboggan run's entrance, just standing there. Never in line, never talking to anyone. She'd watch the riders, or maybe the workers. I really couldn't tell at first. I brushed it off initially. Weirdos weren't uncommon at a place like this, but then I started catching her staring at me. Not casually, like someone curious about the job, but intensely, her head tilted slightly, eyes hidden behind that mess of hair. It did get under my skin, but I didn't want to say anything. I didn't want to seem paranoid. One day, I finally pointed her out to my coworker Mike while we were wiping down the toboggans. "That lady's back again," I said, nodding toward her. She was by the fence, motionless, her coat swaying faintly in the breeze. Mike squinted, then chuckled. "Oh, her? Yeah, she's been around forever. Comes every summer. Harmless, probably. Just likes the vibes or something." "Forever?" I asked. "She doesn't even write anything." He shrugged. "Some people are just drawn to places like this. Don't overthink it." But I couldn't help overthinking it, though. The more I saw her, the more I noticed the little things. Like how she never carried a bag or a phone. No water bottle, no sunscreen, nothing you'd expect on a hot day. And her coat, it was old and tattered at the hem, like something you'd find in a thrift store bin. She didn't belong, at least not the way everyone else did. The real trouble came on a muggy Tuesday evening, late into my shift. The park was winding down, the crowds thinning as the sun sank below the horizon. I got stuck with the last run to the bottom of the hill to collect the toboggans. The path was dim, lit only by a few flickering lamps, and the air smelled of pine and rust. I was dragging the cart behind me, the metal wheels crunching over gravel, when I heard it. A faint shuffle, like someone stepping through the underbrush. I stopped and peered into the trees. "Hello?" I called, figuring it might be a lost kid or a worker taking a shortcut. There was no answer, just the wind rustling the branches. I shook it off and kept going, reaching the base of the slides where the toboggans were piled up. That's when I saw her. She was standing at the edge of the clearing, half hidden by a tree, her gray coat blending into the shadows. My heart jumped into my throat. Ma'am?" I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "Park's closing soon. You need to head back." She didn't move and didn't speak. Instead, she just stood there, her head tilted like always, hair covering her face. I could feel her staring, though, those invisible eyes boring into me. I grabbed a toboggan, trying to act busy, but my hands were shaking. "You can't be down here," I said louder, hauling the toboggan onto the cart. "This area's staff only." Still nothing. Then, slowly, she stepped forward, out of the trees. Her movements were jerky, like a puppet on loose strings, and the closer she got, the worse the feeling in my gut became. I could hear her breathing now, shallow and raspy, like she was struggling for air. I backed up, the cart between us. "Look, I'm serious. You need to leave or I'm calling someone." She stopped, maybe 5 feet away, and for the first time she lifted her head. Her hair parted just enough for me to see her face, or what should have been a face. Her skin was pale and waxy, stretched tight over her skull. But her eyes, they were gone. Just dark, empty sockets, deep and hollow, like something had scooped them out. I froze, my breath catching in my chest. She opened her mouth, and a low, guttural sound came out. Not words, but a moan, long and broken. Then she spoke, her voice crackling like dry leaves. "You see me." "What?" I stammered, my mind reeling. "What are you?" "You see me," she repeated, louder, head twitching. "They don't. You do." I didn't know what she meant, and I didn't care. I dropped the toboggan and ran, sprinting up the path, my shoes slipping on the gravel. I didn't look back until I reached the top, panting and sweaty. When I finally turned, she was gone. No sign of her in the clearing, no sound of footsteps, just the empty hill and the wind. I told my supervisor everything, babbling about the woman and her face. He looked skeptical, but sent security to check it out. Of course they found nothing. No woman, no footprints, and no proof she'd ever been there. Mike just laughed it off when I told him, said I'd probably seen a trick of the light or some prankster in a costume. But I know what I saw. Those empty eyes and that voice, they weren't a trick. I finished out the week, but every shift after that I felt it, the weight of being watched. I'd scan the crowds, expecting to see her gray coat lurking somewhere, those hollow eye sockets fixed on me. I quit before the season ended. I moved on to a boring retail job instead. But sometimes, when I'm alone, I'll hear that raspy moan in my head, "You see me." And I wonder if she's still out there, waiting for someone else to notice her. Someone like me.